Good morning, Asbury. Good morning. It's good to see you this morning. We're so glad you're here and ready to worship God. If you're a visitor, thank you for choosing us, and hopefully you received a visitor's brochure which has a blue sheet in it. And if you would take a few moments to complete that and either put it in the offering plate or in the box in the entryway, we would be really glad to contact you during the week and answer questions and connect you with things that you care about. Also, if you have a prayer for the prayer time later on in the service, there's cards in the front, on the pew that's in front of you. And if you would just fill those out and either give it to me during the passing of the peace or one of the ushers. But don't put it in the offering plate because I don't get that until like tomorrow. So you either hand it to me or one of the ushers. We are glad you're here. We hope this will be a time as the acolytes prepare to come down the aisle and bring the light of Christ. We hope this will be a time for you to center and prepare yourself so that you might be open to the leading of God's Spirit.
As Joshua fulfills all the commands of Moses found in the book of Deuteronomy, all of Israel unites under his leadership. Joshua's final meeting with the people takes place at Shechem, where this passage takes place. Joshua demands that the people establish a covenant with God at Shechem, in which the issue of serving and worshiping the Lord, not other gods, is weighed. After this dialogue, the Israelites' commitment to the covenant with the Lord is formalized. Joshua called together all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. He called in the elders, chiefs, judges, and officers. They presented themselves before God. Then Joshua addressed all the people. This is what God, the God of Israel, says. A long time ago, your ancestors, Terah and his sons, Abraham and Nahor, lived to the east of the river, Euphrates. They worshipped other gods. I took your ancestor Abraham from the far side of the river. I led him all over the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants. So now, fear God. Worship him in total commitment. Get rid of the gods your ancestors worshipped on the far side of the river, the Euphrates, and in Egypt. You worship God. If you decide that it's a bad thing to worship God, then choose a God you'd rather serve, and do it today. Choose one of the gods your ancestors worshipped from the country beyond the river, or one of the gods of the Amorites on whose land you're now living. As for me and my family, we'll worship God. The people answered, we'd never forsake God, never. We'd never leave God to worship other gods. God is our God. He brought up our ancestors from Egypt and from slave conditions. He did all those great signs while we watched. He has kept his eye on us all along the roads we've traveled and among the nations we've passed through. Just for us, he drove out all the nations, Amorites and all, who lived in the land. Count us in. We too are going to worship God. He's our God. Then Joshua told the people, you can't do it. You're not able to worship God. He is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He won't put up with your fooling around and sinning. When you leave God and take up the worship of foreign gods, he'll turn right around and come down on you hard. He'll put it into you, and after all the good he has done for you. But the people told Joshua, no, we worship God. And so Joshua addressed the people. You are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen God for yourselves to worship him. And they said, we are witnesses. Joshua said, now get rid of all the foreign gods you have with you. Say an unqualified yes to God, the God of Israel. The people answered Joshua, we will worship God. What he says, we'll do. Joshua completed a covenant for the people that day there at Shechem. He made it official, spelling it out in detail. Joshua wrote out all the directions and regulations into the book of the revelation of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up under the oak that was in the holy place of God. May God bless this reading from the book of Joshua.
By discussing a question with our pew buddies. Frederick Buechner put it this way: the place God calls you to, thank you. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deepest hunger meet. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. So if you could take a few moments and talk about this with your pew buddy, what might that place look like for you? So you might need to move to talk with someone and just only have 2 or 3 because otherwise everyone won't get a chance to share. And if you don't want to talk, that's okay. Just start working on your mission statement. So this is a great conversation to continue on afterwards at the fellowship time. So Tom Chappell, who is the CEO of the national toothpaste company Tom's of Maine, is an example of one who found in his mission in life by experiencing the call of God in the workplace. 26 years ago, when Chappell was 43, he had just guided his company through a period of aggressive growth, and he had more money than the Sultan of Brunei, as people like to say. Chappell himself, however, was, rather than feeling satisfaction and joy and fulfillment, he was feeling drained, emotionally and spiritually. And the usual advice for business leaders when they get to that point is to sell their business, buy a sailboat, and see the world. But instead, Chappell found direction from a question that the wife of his pastor put to him. "What makes you think Tom's of Maine isn't your ministry?" she asked him. What this CEO decided to do was to stay with the company, but also to enroll in Harvard Divinity School, a move that so surprised the school's admission office that for the first semester, they would only let him enroll as a provisional student because they didn't want him to blow their graduation rates, right? The agreement that Chappell worked out with his company was that he would spend half of each week at Kennebec, Maine, doing all that CEO stuff, and the other half in Cambridge, Massachusetts, being a theological school student. The business ran just fine while he was away, so his co-workers suggested that he stay at seminary and stay and pray. And so he did. And sometimes we need to just do that, right? 4 years later, after graduating from the theological school, Chappell asked one of his professors to meet with his company board and help them draft a mission statement and a business roadmap based on moral and ethical principles. As a result, Tom's of Maine promised to honor its commitments to all of its stakeholders, including employees, owners, vendors, consumers, the community in which it was located, and the environment. Just imagine if every business did that. The company also adopted a plan based on a concept put forth by theologian Martin Buber, a concept that would unite Tom's deep gladness with the world's deepest needs. The business was to start a series of 3 partnerships every year that would promote the common good, such as saving America's rivers, community gardening, and support of a local dental clinic for the poor. That was one of their first one-year projects. In short, Chappell challenged his company to decide what kind of business would they be. one driven only by the bottom line, or one with allegiance to other values. It's the Joshua principle, really. In today's biblical text, the aging leader of the Israelites challenges his people to decide what sort of community they would be now that they had a homeland and homesteads and a mortgage and an SUV and an iPod. Okay, they didn't have those last things, but they did have a homeland. And so he asked them to decide where their allegiance will be given. Joshua couched that challenge in a question about commitments. Choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in the land where you're living. But as for me and my household, we will serve God with a capital G, the God. The people responded that they would do the same. We would never forsake God, never. They kind of forgot about what happened during the Exodus. We would never leave God to worship other gods, never. God is our God. You can just imagine, the cheer going on. Of course, the challenge Joshua issued to the Israelites is also a challenge that we face. Whether we are a captain of industry, a school teacher, a state employee, a lab employee, a business owner, a farmer, a retired person, or a private in someone's business. We must choose whom we will serve and what kind of people we will be. That choice affects all of our lives, including how we function on the rung of the corporate ladder wherever we find ourselves. In this regard, Thomas of Maine is instructed because it shows that making a profit doesn't have to be the only mission of business or the driving force in our own lives. In fact, according to Leah Greenfield, a professor of sociology and political science at Boston University, the desire to make increasingly more money is a fairly recent and a localized phenomenon. In her book, The Spirit of Capitalism, she says that for the most of history, economic growth had not been the primary goal of trade and industry. Rather, she says the desire for status is what drove business. People work to gain respect and admiration. And if you think about that, that's still true for many people today. She says that as nation-states emerged in the 17th and 18th centuries, and especially in the 19th century, a patriotic fervor affected the attitude toward making money. People wanted their country to be well thought of, and one way to make that happen was for their nation to be a place of economic prosperity. That nationalism began to shift to see the bottom line as the main line, a reason for being in business. But other factors have motivated the marketplace as well, or the workplace. Greenfield points out that many leaders who built the American economy actually lost money in their schemes, but proceeded anyway by their desire to create and to be seen as creative. What's more, in early America, many people had that sense that when they labored, they were actually rowing for heaven, in the words of the Puritan minister Cotton Mather. And so profit was beside the point. This is the Protestant work ethic. However we got there, the profit is not beside the point in our places of employment today. All of us who labor are participating in the creation of wealth for someone. A few of us who, like Tom Chappell, are in the position of corporate leadership can shape the stated values and goals of our workplace. The rest of us probably do not have that option, and most of us do not have the choice of whether we will work or not. But we do have the same challenge that Joshua put before the people of Israel. What kind of people will we be, and to whom will we commit ourselves? The answer to that is not a secondary decision in any way. Those of us who work spend the majority of 250 days every year at our place of employment. So when we decide what our values are as workers, we are actually talking about how we will live our lives. While we may not be able to influence the corporate mission where we work, we can and should make a personal decision about how following in the way of Jesus will play out in the workplace and in our lives. And if we're retired, the same holds true for that, because in retirement we do things, right? So We need to figure out how our values are going to affect what we say yes to and what we say no to, what we spend our time and energy on. At a minimum, I think the decision should be this: I will be a moral, ethical person committed to following Jesus. And its corollary is, I will accept the consequences of being moral and ethical. But a third part of that decision can be the one that Chappelle made in response to the question from his pastor's wife. He decided that his work could also be his ministry. And we can decide the same. My work will be my ministry. Let me give you an example. In Cleveland, Ohio, there's a mail carrier by the name of Bill Merriman. He was featured several years ago in the city's newspaper because someone had noticed that Merriman did more than simply deliver the mail each day. Yes, he spent time sorting and delivering, but he also took time to listen to people on his route. And that was a big help, especially to those who were shut in. But he also offered more specific help to others. He aided some recent immigrants in his delivery area in helping them to find English language tutors. He referred battered women to places where they could find shelter. And since several families on his route were Hispanic, he took the trouble to learn Spanish. Now, isn't that radical hospitality? He carried a list of social work agencies with him just in case he needed to refer to someone. And then on a nearby route, when someone saved a little child with the use of CPR, he went and got trained in that, so he would be able to use that should the need arise. One day he found on his business route that a business needed a secretary, and just around the corner he found a woman who needed a job, and he connected the two. Merriman's work was clearly more than employment aimed at earning a paycheck. He made such a difference in the lives of those who lived along his route. One man put it this way: in a job, you give something to get something. In ministry, you return something that has already been given to you. A job depends on your abilities, and ministry depends on your availability to God. Joshua made himself available to God all of his life. And near the end of his life, he was about to change direction. He suggests that ministry and meaning are all about making choices. Joshua doesn't make it complicated. His 7 words of advice for how we should live our lives is this: choose this day whom you will serve. A story in Dear Abby reminds us that choosing whom we serve can also involve our finances. A letter to Dear Abby complaining about the churches asking for money drew this response from Bob Whitmore of Eugene, Oregon. Mr. Whitmore sent in a clipping for which there was no author but only a title: Is the church costing too much? And the article read like this: last Sunday, another golfer sank the last putt on the 18th green and received a check for $50,000 for 4 rounds of golf, plus an automobile for himself and his partner. This week, the papers reported that a certain popular singer will receive $100,000 per week for her current singing engagement. Americans spend annually more on dog food than they do on church contributions. I didn't know that until I did this research. It's not unusual for an individual to pay more for his country club membership than he gives to the church. Is the church costing too much? And then the article goes on. Let me share this experience with you. On June 2nd, 1940, a little girl was born to us. She cost us money from the moment she was born. As she grew from babyhood to girlhood, she cost even more. She had to have more expensive clothes and more expensive shoes. And she had to go to the doctor because of all those childhood illnesses, and that cost money. And then when she got into high school, that cost even more money. She needed a cell phone, she needed more clothes and party clothes and all that. And then when she went to college, we discovered, along with other parents, that all college expenses are not listed in the catalog. And then after graduation, she fell in love and married, and she was married in a church wedding, and that cost a lot of money too. And then 5 months after her marriage, she suddenly sickened, and within a week she died. She hasn't cost us a penny since that day we walked away from her grave. As long as the church is alive, it will cost money, and the more alive a church is, the more money it will cost. Only a dead church, like a dead child, is no longer expensive. Think it over. Is the church costing too much? In October, we begin our stewardship campaign, and I believe it's really important annually to remind ourselves that we control our money does not control us. And so one of the things I want to invite you to do is to take your mission statement that you're going to write tonight, right? Or tomorrow? And take that, and then take your debit card or credit card receipts, and if you really want to do a good job of this, take a little notebook, and for 2 weeks, 4 weeks is better, but for 2 weeks, write down everything you spend your money on, put it in categories, and then compare what you spend with your values. Are they in line with each other? Most people discover they're spending a lot of money on something they had no idea about. And so I think annually it's really good to take our mission statement and our expenditures, put them together, and see where we can make changes so our spending is more in line with our values. So now is the time to recommit ourselves to giving in a way that supports the things you care most about. And as for me and my household, we're going to serve God. Amen.